There is a simple fixation cross in the center of the screen. The patient is told to keep his eyes on it and not look away. For a fraction of a second, an image of a key flashes on the left side. When the researcher asks what he saw, the man answers confidently, "Nothing, just a flash." Then several objects are placed in front of him, hidden behind a screen, and he is asked to find the correct one with his left hand. His fingers search for a moment, then pull out the key. Who saw the image if the man insists he never saw it? Who chose the key? And why did the correct answer appear in his hand before it appeared in his words? Today we are going inside the real split brain experiments, some of the strangest studies of consciousness ever performed on human beings. And near the end, we will reach the moment when the brain does more than act without an explanation. It invents a reason that never existed, then accepts that reason as the truth. One thing needs to be clear from the beginning. These people were not operated on for the sake of a psychology experiment. They had severe epilepsy that could not be controlled with conventional treatment. During some seizures, abnormal electrical activity began in one region of the brain and then spread. The corpus callosum, the brain's largest bridge between the hemispheres, could become the route that allowed the seizure to reach the other side. Surgeons cut that bridge, either partially or completely, to prevent seizures from moving freely from one hemisphere to the other. The operation did not always eliminate epilepsy, but for some patients, it greatly reduced the most dangerous attacks. After recovery, many of them could speak, walk, spend time with their families, and appear almost unchanged in everyday life. The strange part did not reveal itself at the dinner table. It required a laboratory, careful control of where the patient was looking, and an image flashed too quickly for the eyes to follow. In the 1960s, Roger Sperry, Michael Gazzaniga, and their colleagues began systematically testing what happens when the two hemispheres can no longer exchange information in the usual way. This research later became part of the work for which Sperry received the Nobel Prize. But the most important discovery was not simply that the left and right sides of the brain were good at different things. Scientists were already beginning to understand that. The real shock was this. One half of the brain could receive information, use it, and guide an action, while the speaking half honestly had no idea what had happened. If you are interested in real experiments that make the familiar explanation of the human mind stop working, subscribe to TimelessRift. We are not going to turn complicated evidence into a neat myth. The evidence is strange enough on its own. To understand the experiment, forget the popular idea that the left eye belongs to the right brain. That is not how it works. Researchers were separating visual fields, not eyes. When you look straight ahead, information to the left of your fixation point is processed mainly by the right hemisphere. Information to the right is processed mainly by the left. Both eyes contribute to both visual fields. That is why the stimulus had to appear very quickly, just to one side of the central point, before the patient had time to move his eyes. An image in the left visual field was sent to the right hemisphere. But in most people, language is organized mainly in the left hemisphere. In an intact brain, that is not a problem. Information crosses the corpus callosum, and the speaking system gains access to what the other side saw. After a complete callosotomy, that familiar route is gone. The right hemisphere sees the image, recognizes it, and may retain the information for at least a short time, but when the researcher asks a question out loud, the system responsible for speech is the one that answers. It checks the information available to it and reports, truthfully, "I didn't see anything." That does not necessarily mean the entire person saw nothing. It means the part of the brain capable of giving a verbal report never received the relevant information. Now add the hand. The left hand is controlled mainly by the right hemisphere. If the image of the key reached the right hemisphere, that same side of the brain could guide the left hand toward the key. The words are still unavailable, but the action has already been prepared. The scene becomes almost absurd. The voice says, "There was nothing there." The hand answers, "There was. Here it is." Consciousness may not know who made the decision, but apparently it still dislikes leaving a blank space in the report. When I first read the descriptions of these tests, the lack of speech seemed like the weakest part. It was easy to imagine that the right hemisphere had not understood the task at all, and that the hand had simply guessed. But the classic experiments were designed to test exactly that possibility. Patients could use the left hand to locate an object that matched the image, pair related pictures, draw what had been shown, and solve certain tasks based on meaning. The right hemisphere was not an empty screen. Its abilities varied from patient to patient, but it could recognize objects, understand some words and short phrases, process spatial relationships, and express knowledge without speech. It simply could not always transfer that knowledge into an ordinary verbal answer. Researchers could even present different information to the two visual fields. The left and right hands would then choose different objects, with each hand responding to the information received by its own hemisphere. One body could produce two correct answers to two different questions, even though neither side possessed the whole picture. Sometimes the separation became more visible. In a few patients, especially soon after surgery, the hands appeared to work against one another. One hand might correct, interrupt, or undo what the other had just done. During block design tasks, one hand could begin building a pattern while the other almost immediately disrupted it. These cases are real, but they are often retold as if every split-brain patient spent the rest of life fighting a civil war inside the body. That is not true. Such conflicts were uncommon, depended heavily on the individual injury and surgery, and often became less pronounced over time. In everyday life, many patients moved with remarkable coordination. They walked, dressed themselves, avoided obstacles, and in some cases could swim, dance, or play musical instruments. The hemispheres had lost their main communication channel, but the body did not become a car with two drivers who had both just discovered the steering wheel. Some coordination remains possible through shared sensory input, deeper brain structures, bilateral control of certain movements, and habits learned before surgery. The hemispheres can also pick up external clues from each other: the movement of a hand, a change in posture, the direction of the eyes. Researchers call this cross-cueing. The direct internal cable has been cut, but each side can still observe the consequences of what the other side does. That is an important limitation. Surgically dividing the brain does not place the hemispheres inside two sealed rooms. They remain in the same skull, receive information from the same body, and act in the same physical world. Even with that limitation, the result is deeply uncomfortable. We usually treat a person's verbal report as the highest authority on their inner experience. If someone says, "I didn't see anything," it feels natural to believe them. In these experiments, the hand reveals that the spoken account reflects only the information available to the system that can speak, not necessarily the entire process taking place inside the brain. And that is where the experiment becomes personal. When you explain one of your own decisions, are you actually remembering the cause that produced it? Or does consciousness sometimes receive a finished action and then write the most believable commentary it can? Is a human being one unified consciousness, or an alliance of several systems that have simply learned to cooperate well enough? There is no comfortable answer, and I am genuinely curious where you would draw the line. This is usually the point where popular accounts declare victory. The operation, they say, created two complete personalities inside one body. But the evidence does not allow us to go that far. There were very few patients. Their epilepsy, age, previous brain damage, and exact surgery were different. Some had only part of the corpus callosum severed. Others had a more complete disconnection. The language abilities of the right hemisphere also varied significantly. A dramatic result from one patient cannot automatically be applied to every split-brain patient, much less to every healthy person. There is an even larger complication. In 2017, researchers carried out detailed tests on two patients whose corpus callosum had been completely severed. The results did not fit neatly into the classic textbook picture. The patients could report the presence and location of stimuli in both visual fields, whether they answered verbally, with the left hand, or with the right. Yet they still had difficulty comparing detailed information across the two visual fields. The authors suggested that visual processing had become divided while the conscious observer remained unified. Other researchers disagreed. They argued that some of the results might be explained by tiny eye movements, cross-cueing, remaining neural pathways, or simply by the fact that different tasks measure different things. The cautious modern conclusion is less dramatic, but more accurate. Cutting the corpus callosum severely disrupts the integration of information. The hemispheres can process some stimuli independently and may have unequal access to speech, memory, attention, and action. But that does not automatically mean that two complete personalities appear, each with a separate biography and a fully independent stream of consciousness. Perhaps the question, one mind or two, is too blunt. The brain does not have to choose between perfect unity and total separation. It may be partially unified, divided in one task, coordinated in another, and able to rebuild cooperation wherever daily life demands it. And yet there is one experiment that makes the word coordination feel much less reassuring. A patient known as PS was shown two images at the same time. In the right visual field, available to the speaking left hemisphere, there was a chicken claw. In the left visual field, processed by the right hemisphere, there was a snowy scene. Several pictures were then placed in front of him, and he was asked to choose one with each hand. His right hand, guided by the left hemisphere, selected a chicken. His left hand, following the information in the right hemisphere, selected a snow shovel. Both choices were correct. Then the researcher asked why he had chosen those two images. The speaking left hemisphere knew about the chicken claw, so the choice of the chicken made perfect sense. It could also see that the left hand was pointing to a shovel, but it had no access to the snowy scene that explained that choice. The logical answer would have been, I don't know why my left hand picked the shovel. Instead, the patient calmly explained that the shovel was needed to clean out the chicken coop. The reason appeared after the action. It was plausible, coherent, and entirely invented. The patient was not trying to deceive the researcher. His speaking system saw two facts, a chicken and a shovel, and built a story that connected them. Gazzaniga described this tendency as the work of the left hemisphere interpreter, a system that creates an explanation for what is happening, even when the real cause is unavailable to it. The most disturbing part is not that the brain can be wrong. At least some errors arrive with a feeling of doubt. This explanation arrived with confidence. That does not prove that every decision you make is unconscious, or that consciousness is always inventing excuses after the fact. The experiment shows something narrower and more reliable. Sincerely feeling like the author of a decision does not guarantee that the system explaining it actually knows where the decision came from. Now we can return to the key from the beginning. Who saw the image? The right hemisphere. Who guided the hand? The same system that received the visual information. Who said that nothing had happened? The left hemisphere, responsible for speech, with no access to the event. This was not one mind suddenly turning into two strangers. It was one person whose internal systems had received different pieces of reality, with each system acting on the version available to it. Most of the time, the brain hides this internal labor so well that we give the result a simple name, I. A split brain does not necessarily create two people. It reveals how many things have to agree before one person can feel like a single person at all. But control is not divided into only two states, mine or not mine. In the next episode, we will examine 5 levels at which the brain gradually takes over. From capturing attention and triggering automatic behavior, to the moment consciousness begins defending a decision whose true cause it never knew. And perhaps the real question is not who makes every individual decision. The real question is how many systems inside you have to agree before you can honestly say, I decided.